I'm bringing in $500 a week, $600 a week as a kid. But my dad, who's a school teacher, he's off in the summers. He's asking me like, so how did you make this money? And I'm telling him, I'm kind of explaining. He's like,
nervous.
Yeah. And he's like, wait, is this legal? I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, so you have permission from the golf course? I'm like, yeah, Dad, I do. This is no problem at all. And he goes there and he's not content with one bag. He stays for like 7 hours. And the first night, he's pulling in 1,000 balls a night. Well, within 2 weeks, the park ranger catches my dad, ends up getting arrested.
You in 4 years, he goes 2 weeks.
Exactly. And while we're there, there's 2 celebrity guests. Dante Culpepper, who at the time was a quarterback for the Vikings, and Jerry Porter, who at the time was a wide receiver for the Raiders. They were the celebrity guests. And it was in a restaurant, small setting, and I'm about 10 feet away from Dante Culpepper. And I hear him talking to Jerry Porter about my website. And all I could think is like, I literally did no marketing, no advertising. There wasn't even Google. Like Google was literally not, you couldn't do a search at this time. There was no YouTube. It was completely before that. And all I'm thinking is, I think I might be onto something here. ESPN had reached out and they were developing a reality television show based on the video game, going from California to New York, competing for $100,000. And I had the opportunity to go to Ben Roethlisberger's house, compete with him, play him in Madden, of which I torched him, but that's to be expected.
Have you ever played Madden with an NFL quarterback with 2 Super Bowl rings on a reality TV show? Today's guest has. We're sitting down with Daniel Grundei, a former #1 gamer in the world in FIFA and Madden, a D1 soccer player with an entrepreneurial spirit who also had 3, 4, maybe 5 arrests along the way. Definitely in the running for one of the most interesting men in Austin. Here's Daniel's story. But maybe if we just started with who you are, where you're from originally, because there were some childhood stories even you were sharing with me that I think are indicative of who you are today, and we're pointing to that. So yeah, let's just start. Young Daniel, where are you from?
Sure. My name is Daniel Grundei. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio. Grew up in Cincinnati essentially my whole life. Moved to Austin in 2015. Growing up, I grew up in a religious family. My parents raised me in a Baptist environment, very fundamental. And it was an amazing opportunity because I did really learn the differences of right and wrong. And I had a really great childhood that way. My parents are both teachers, which was also great because they had the opportunity to be at my events and available on the weekends. So I was unbelievably blessed in my childhood. Now, a couple of the things that I would say were kind of interesting. I'm a middle child, and always from the time I was very young, had an entrepreneurial mindset and always thinking through what's the best angle on things. So it started in, I'd say 6th grade, where I was literally selling gum in middle school. So at Sam's, they would sell packs of Big Red and Juicy Fruit and this gum for 12 cents a pack back then, shows my age. But I would sell for $0.25 a piece. So I'm making somewhere around $1.25 a pack. Yeah. So I'd probably make $5, $6 a day. Wow. I was like, well, that's pretty good. Like, that's not too bad for a kid. Yeah. And gum in middle school was kind of like a contraband. You weren't allowed to have gum. So it was a little bit risque. I'm not going to lie. It was tricky.
Already a rebel. Yeah. Like
exactly. So it was great. But the next step to that, I lived across the street from a golf course. And my friends and I used to joke around on the golf course all the time. In fact, probably the first time I ever got in trouble was we were joking around and somebody was shooting off, I can't remember what tee, but they're on the tee, shoot off onto the fairway. Perfect shot right there. And all of a sudden, me and my friends, we run and steal the golf ball, and we leave a ransom note. Like, if you want to see your golf ball alive, call this number. And we left the number to one of my other friends. It was so funny. So we're always like,
I would lose it.
Oh my goodness. The guy was like so mad, trying to chase us, but we were like 12 years old.
Yeah,
like,
people like their rules on golf courses and everything you already have.
Oh my goodness, so mad. Yeah. And so we liked hanging out on the golf course, just playing jokes. Well, one night we were, and on the course you would find balls randomly, and I might find a few here and there. But a couple friends and I had this idea, like, what if we went in the lake? Because there are a lot of balls in that lake. So we decided to go in. The first night we get in, I pull out 40, 50 balls. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm gonna need a better plan. So the next day I bring a pillow sack and I get in, I start pulling them, maybe get a couple hundred balls or 150. I mean, there are a lot. But I was like, I think I need a better plan. So then I got a wetsuit because you get a little cold up there, even in the north. So I have a wetsuit and I have this whole technique. So now I'm getting 200-300 balls a night. And so I had this plan, like, okay, now I'm gonna sell these balls. So I put them in my dishwasher at home. My mom wasn't happy about it, trying to clean them off. They didn't really get them clean. So then I put them in the washing machine, trying to get them clean. Still didn't work totally, but I'm like doing my best to clean them. I'm polishing. Then I get egg cartons and I was like matching them up, putting them in dozen. And I thought I was doing a really good job trying to sell them, but it's really hard to sell balls. So it got a little tricky.
Yeah.
So then I go back into Yellow Pages. This is when there was actually Yellow Pages. And I start calling places, seeing if they wanted to buy used golf balls. And I found a guy who sold used golf balls. And so I said, I'm gonna take him in. He asked me to come in. I come in, I show him how like organized I was. And he looked at me, just kind of laughed. He's like, these balls look terrible. Like, they're not clean. I can't sell them this way. He said, listen, don't clean them, nothing. Just bring in any ball you have. I'll buy every single one for 23 cents a ball or 20, I can't remember exactly.
Sure.
But he just was gonna buy them all. So within a week, I'm pulling in 1,000 balls a week on average, and that's spending a couple hours a night. So I'm making $230 a week, whatever. But that just wasn't quite enough. So now I start recruiting friends, and I said, I'll pay 15 cents a ball. And I was just taking a margin. So I ended up having like 6 people working for me for several summers, and was pulling in, I mean,
I'm like middle school years? How old did you say you
middle
were
school,
for
so I
these?
was 6th through 9th grade. So about 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I'm bringing in $500 a week, $600 a week as a kid. And this is, I mean, that's probably the equivalent of like $1,000 a week now.
Right.
So really doing well. So I go get a moped. My parents were floored, like, oh my goodness, you just bought a moped. It was the craziest thing. But my dad, who's a school teacher, he's off in the summers, he's asking me like, well, so how did you make this money? And I'm telling him, I'm kind of explaining. He's like,
nervous.
Yeah. And he's like, wait, is this legal? I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, so you have permission from the golf course? I'm like, yeah, Dad, I do. This is no problem at all. And so my dad's like, this is amazing. I would love to do this.
Yeah.
And so typically I would spend about an hour and a half a night. I would get tired.
Yeah.
And then I would leave. So I show my dad what we're doing, and he goes there, and he's not content with one bag. He stays for like 7 hours. And the first night, he's pulling in 1,000 balls a night, every single night. And so he did this for maybe 2 weeks. I've never seen more golf balls in my life. I mean, literally 10,000 golf balls in my garage that my dad had stored. And my dad had bought some recycling bins. He was so excited, and he had it all filled. So he was really pumped up. Well, within 2 weeks, the park ranger catches my dad and pulls up with the flashlight like, what are you doing there, sir? Now, I didn't tell my dad. Typically, if the park ranger comes, we hide. So it's dark, so we would like kind of tuck in next to the walls, go underwater. They couldn't find us. My dad was like, oh, I'm just getting golf balls. So he ends up getting arrested.
You in 4 years, he goes 2 weeks.
Exactly. He's like a bull in a china shop. He just could not find a way to do it. So that's probably on me. I didn't tell him, but he gets arrested. And so he's a school teacher.
No.
And this is in the newspaper. So when you get arrested, your name goes in the newspaper. So my dad is like freaking out. I've never seen him this mad in my life. But long story short, he had kind of brokered with the park ranger and the police. It all went pretty well, but it also derailed my career. So I had to stop doing it at that
a
point.
long-term plan here. Yeah. How much money do you think you made in a 4-year window?
I would,
as a middle
yeah,
schooler?
I've actually done the math on this. I would guess about $30,000.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe 25, but it was
30
$7,000,
years ago.
$8,000, $9,000 a summer. Like it was legitimately, and it was so amazing. And quite frankly, I paid for everything through my entire middle school, high school career.
Yeah. So that just like starts young for you? Like you just remember being that way as early as you can remember? There's not like a moment you're like...
So my thought process was always trying to figure out the angles on things, try to come up with, I don't want to say tricks, but what are we missing? How can I learn something new? And I would say from a very young age, I had this mentality that I wanted to know more, learn more, figure things out. but I never felt it was cultivated. It was just something that was in me.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you're also a great athlete, right? So you have a soccer career
I got to pause on that.
developing.
I don't think I am a great athlete. And
Okay.
actually, I would say that was another way that I always tried to be thinking a step ahead and be curious. I was a good athlete, but I think I put so much effort into every sport I ever played.
Wow,
And I
yeah.
always worked really hard, not just to prepare, but to learn more about the game. So I would say I just really worked hard to be a step ahead.
Yeah,
I
so
actually,
the mental aspect of the game. Yeah, just
I have a theory that if I were a little bit bigger, stronger, faster, I'd be a pro athlete.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I'm not. So yes, I had a really successful sports career as a high school and middle school athlete.
Yeah.
But I never felt like I was a great athlete. I think that's something that I don't think you have to be really good at certain levels.
right. Well, how did you know then, or when did you start to pick up that you could play, at the collegiate level?
So I would say by middle school, my 8th grade year, I never knew how good I was at sports, but I was pretty good in my little area. But in 8th grade, I went to a tryout. It was called Olympic Development Program. And the way that worked with soccer is all of the kids that are your age go to a tryout in your city. And they make essentially an all-city team, but it's based on age groups. So instead of high school, all-city or all-district, this is just, I was 8th grade, and I made the all-city team as one of the top players in Cincinnati at the time. Well, then there's 6 major cities in Ohio. Those cities get together for a state tournament. And then they make an all-tournament team, which is all-state. So one of the top players in Ohio. In my 8th grade year, I made the Ohio State team. So at that point, I realized I was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I worked really, really hard in soccer to the point where prior to my junior year, I spent the summer in South America playing in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. So, and it was just because I had this passion to do it. I went to stay with a host family who spoke 0 English. I spoke no Spanish. So I spent 90 days there. I'm at altitude, about 6,000 feet, and trained for 90 days. And I remember coming back, I was literally dreaming in Spanish, which is the weirdest thing ever.
Sure.
And then, looking into college, I had several college opportunities to play, I was unbelievably blessed. And interestingly, on my state team, that program I was part of, the University of Cincinnati head coach was actually my state team coach. So I had some familiarity with them.
Yeah.
At the time, I remember the coach talking to me, hey, you're going to be part of this rebuilding process, because University of Cincinnati wasn't a great Division I program at the time. It was a Conference USA team. They were just okay.
Yeah.
By the time I get to campus, a month before school starts, the coach was fired. They brought in a new coach.
Wow.
He brought in 6 of his own recruits, like 3 of them from Europe, and they were all far better than I was. And what I realized quickly is this was going to be challenging for me to play. Coupled with the fact that the new coach is telling me you're not strong enough. We want you to redshirt. You're not going to be able to contribute this year. And that was really, really hard for me, thinking just earlier, hey, I'm going to be part of this new program. And so then I end up getting hurt after I redshirt, spend a couple semesters at University of Cincinnati, but eventually had to pivot. And I went to Northern Kentucky University, where I finished my career, played Division II, of which now it's a Division I program. But I had to pivot, and it was humbling to know, hey, you thought you were I thought I was so good. I'm like, I guess I'm really not as good as I thought.
Yeah, any big takeaways from playing, at the collegiate level? Like, did you feel like there was anything you just garnered from that season, or even the humbling, like having to pivot and switch?
Absolutely. So I would say I learned there, and the lesson was really to take positive feedback, take criticism, and take it well and use it. So what I was good at is having a chip on my shoulder and really working hard.
Yeah.
But I wasn't good at receiving feedback. And that's something that over time I think I've done really well.
Yeah.
And I think for anybody who's got that interest in learning and growing and improving, if you can take the right feedback, you're going to get better
Yeah.
much quicker. And I realize I'm smart enough to know that I'm not that smart.
Yeah, no, that's it's curious to me because we've already talked about this curiosity being a part of your story, and this humbling experience that was required for you to be curious about other people's feedback to you, right?
yeah.
So there might have been this part even young of like, I'm curious, but I can figure it out if I work hard enough, I'm smart enough, and it's almost like supercharged if you're now willing to be curious about other people's insights. On the other side of
Absolutely.
you.
I think that's a great point. And for me, it took a long time to get to a point to realize other people, they're not trying to attack me, they're trying to help and support me. And I think in life, so many people get defensive with feedback and to get defensive with thinking that they're not perfect.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always wanted to grow and learn and improve. I didn't always know how to do it. And I think I learned a lot of that through my college career, specifically with soccer, but really with everything competitive that I've ever done.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. That's really impactful. And okay, so what is the timeline then? Because I think it's around here or right after this that you have now a parallel gaming career starting to take off, right? So we're in a whole nother avenue. What was that timeline?
So,
when did that begin?
I condensed the soccer story a little bit. I went from University of Cincinnati, where I ended up getting injured, having the red shirt. The very next year, I ended up playing at a Division III school in Cincinnati, which was really a great opportunity. I took a few years off where I was doing some work, and then I went back to school for Northern Kentucky, where I finished. But at the time, it's around 2003, when you're an athlete and you're competitive, just because you finished playing, I needed a new outlet for how to compete. And that's when I really started playing way too many video games on campus.
Sure.
So I always preface that by saying I didn't even play video games as a kid, not much. I mean, I really didn't. So I'm playing Madden NFL football in the dorms at NKU. And it gets to the point where they're like, dude, you can't play anymore, because I was beating everybody. And it wasn't even like I just naturally was good. I would lose some, and I'd say, why did that guy beat me? So I would work and learn and grow.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where they just wouldn't let me play anymore. So then I started hanging out with another group of guys, and we're doing every week playing Madden. And at the time, Madden was the largest selling video game in the country, 6 million copies a year. I don't think it's quite as popular now, but it was huge at the time.
Sure.
So we're playing every week, and finally they're like, dude, you can't play here anymore. So everywhere I'm going, I'm getting kicked out of playing.
That's awesome.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And so then I started doing some local tournaments where I would compete in these tournaments, and I was beating everybody. There was actually one other guy in the area that could compete with me, and he and I ended up forming a strong friendship, but we were dominating every tournament to where then we just got kicked out of every tournament. They wouldn't even let us play in these events anymore. So it was kind of crazy, but the last tournament I was in, the winner got a trip to Las Vegas. So I'm competing, and I ended up winning the tournament, getting a trip to Las Vegas. Simultaneously, my very last class in college was a psychology class, and I had an assignment which was to write a paper on something that you consider yourself an expert on. And at the time, I considered myself an expert at playing Madden football.
Right.
And it was kind of a joke, but I decided to create a website with screenshots and images and on the game of Madden. And I used kind of a Ron Jaworski play breakdown style of showing these plays and how you can dominate the game. And I thought it was really cool. I created a pretty novel technique to grab high resolution screenshots, because at the time in 2003, everything was grainy. There were it was very, very early stages of the internet, early stages. And I was able to get high res screenshots, put them into a website, develop it top to bottom. And I turned it in for this assignment. My teacher thought it was cool. I think the teacher liked it, but I don't remember that much, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I finished the assignment, I graduate, whatever. Well, within 3 weeks, I'm going to Las Vegas from this trip I won with the last tournament I played. Maybe it was 4 weeks, but it was a short amount of time afterwards.
Right.
And while I was there, and I was there with the other person I told you who we were the two people that dominated Cincinnati, and we decided to go to the Madden National Championships. We weren't playing at the time, but it was in Las Vegas. And while we're there, there's two celebrity guests, Dante Culpepper, who at the time was a quarterback for the Vikings, and Jerry Porter, who at the time was a wide receiver for the Raiders. They were the celebrity guests. And it was in a restaurant, small setting, and I'm about 10 feet away from Dante Culpepper. And I hear him talking to Jerry Porter about my website. And all I could think is like, I literally did no marketing, no advertising. There wasn't even Google. Like Google was literally not, you couldn't do a search at this time. There was no YouTube. It was completely before that. And all I'm thinking is, I think I might be onto something here. This could potentially be something.
Do you have any idea how they came across it? Like, how does it make it?
So there's a pretty wide network of competitive Madden gamers. And as soon as a few people found it, it starts spreading a little bit. So likely it was through the online circles is the best I can tell, but I never asked. So I don't exactly know where. But he's talking about the website, and it was really interesting because there's a lot of mixed emotions about this website because it was almost like a magician telling secrets, like behind the scenes. There were people very upset about it because there was like an integrity of the game that I was somehow exposing. So I end up, again, continuing to learn and grow on this website and turning it into a subscription service, and had users pay, I think it's $20 a year, and I would update once a week with new tips and strategies and hits. And within 2 years, it was the largest sports gaming website in the world according to ComScore data. So I mean, it just had exploded. We had over 20,000 subscribers.
College paper into the largest.
Well, it was amazing, but it blew up. So this website's getting huge, and then we realized, okay, if you're playing Madden in the fall, it's seasonal. You may be playing NBA 2K in the wintertime. You may be playing FIFA in the spring. You may be playing MLB The Show in the summer. So we turned it into a sports gaming website where we gave tips and tricks on the spectrum of sports games. From there, I ended up hiring at one point up to, I think, 33 people working for me, where I would hire people to give tips. So they were part-time employees. We had 5 full-time employees. We had pulled in some outside funding from a venture capitalist and our angel investor. Simultaneously, ESPN had reached out and they were developing a reality television show based on the video game. And they called, they said, Daniel, we want you to be on this show. Will you come do it? So it was another opportunity. Now, this game show was, or the reality show, was also when I met my wife. And still remember her dad thinking like, I'm gonna have to support them my whole life. This guy is a loser. Like, he plays video games.
He's a professional gamer.
He was not happy at all about it. Not happy in the least. But I get on this reality television show where I'm playing video games with top gamers across the country, going from California to New York, competing for $100,000 and representing different NFL players. And I had the opportunity to go to Ben Roethlisberger's house, compete with him, play him in Madden, of which I torched him, but that's to be expected.
Ben Roethlisberger, he's like a Superman on the field, so it's only right that Clark Kent represents him on the bus.
Daniel?
Yeah,
how's it going? Ben Roethlisberger,
Nice to meet you.
welcome to my house.
I appreciate it.
Come on in. So you play Madden a lot, right?
That's what I do for a living, is just Madden, so.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty fun.
Well, I like my chances then. I was Atlanta, and he was the Eagles, and so I wanted to just try and use Michael Vick and get out of the pocket and run. We only played a half because he was beating me so bad.
It was nice to be able to sit there and play with an NFL quarterback and be able to outthink him on the field. Obviously, it was a Madden game, so I know it wasn't that great of an accomplishment.
You know, you gotta represent the longest last name in sports, so you gotta go out and win it for us, okay?
I will, definitely. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
All right.
Did you have a team that you always played as, or how does this work? Like,
Each year, I had a different team that was kind of the team that I needed to play. As part of the rules of this reality show, I had to use the Steelers. And they weren't that great that year. I wasn't going to tell Ben that. But they weren't that great. And he used the Falcons against me because Michael Vick was like a cheat code in the game so fast. But still throttled him. But it was just an amazing experience. I got to do this show. And then the very first time I ever met my wife's family, we went out to dinner. He was an athletic director for a high school. So I'm there with a bunch of high school kids at a state tournament in basketball. And I had a kid come up and ask for my autograph. And at that point, I think my father-in-law was like, okay, I guess he's not a total loser.
That's awesome.
It was pretty embarrassing, but I think he got a kick out of it.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
It took me some time, but I think I've changed his mind a little bit.
That's
So after that happened, the site continued to grow. And now I'm starting to get calls from Fox, from ESPN, from CBS, and they start saying, hey, we want to acquire this website. We want to really see how we can integrate this into our coverage. Ended up selling the website to CBS, which was amazing. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to work as a product manager for CBS for 2 years as part of the integration of our website into their gaming properties.
Wild, yeah.
And probably, Jordan, the most interesting thing that happened through that time period is we were brainstorming, okay, how do we integrate our website on sports video games into CBS properties, of which the largest CBS property, CBS Sports, they own March Madness. How do we capitalize on that? What can we do as a cross-branding? So came up with an idea of, hey, let's create a tool, and it's a roster tool where we take the video game NCAA basketball, it's another EA Sports game, and let users leverage those roster analytics to help fill out their bracket. So we could look at who has the advantages at each position level, down to anything really nuanced. So if you wanted to see who was a better three-point shooting team, we could look at this analytics. Or if we wanted to see which team had more size or depth, there was a tool, and you could look at it right through the roster within the video game. Because the video game has 50 plus attributes for every player, top to bottom. So it's actually, it was a novel idea, and I think it worked really well. And I never saw specific metrics to see how much of a success. However, about a year later, I find out Daryl Morey, who's the general manager of the Houston Rockets at the time, had actually licensed the tool to leverage the video game to make trade decisions in the NBA. So he's using the NBA video game, using the roster tool to decide whether he's gonna make trades or not. And all I could think is like, is this guy a genius, or is he the stupidest person in the world?
It's one of the two. There's no middle ground.
I couldn't tell.
Right?
I couldn't tell, and it was so insane to me. But the I don't know if it's ironic or whatever, but
I mean, it's the GM of Philadelphia today, right? So
exactly.
It's not like he's an idiot. I mean,
well,
the guy's
it was right
amazing.
before he traded for James Harden, of which is considered one of the most lopsided trades of all time.
Right.
And at that point, nobody wanted to trade with him anymore. Like, dude, you're gonna screw us. Like, so he ended up building amazing teams in Houston. Now he's with Philadelphia. So he's had a great career, and he's really focused on analytics. Of which I love that mindset. I'm a data junkie myself. But I couldn't believe he used the video game and a tool that I had created through there to start evaluating trades. So it was an amazing experience, and kind of capped my video game career. And at this point, I struggle to play video games because I'm so addicted to perfection and success that it would be like an alcoholic drinking. You just can't have 2 beers if you're an alcoholic. So I don't play very much.
5 in the world at one point, right? I mean, how are those rankings decided?
So there's an online ranking system, and then there's a tournament ranking system. With Madden, across a period of a couple years, I had anywhere from number 1 to maybe number 19, depending on the season. In 2004, I was in the top 2 the entire year. So generally, top 5 to 10 for a several year period.
I'm sure you could write a book on this question, but like in brief, or to dumb it down, what makes somebody significantly better at Madden than the guy next to him? Is this like strategy? Is this knowing your opponent? Is this, I mean, what?
It's strategy. So there's a couple different components that are interesting. One of them is stick skill, hand-eye coordination. And that legitimately peaks in your early 20s and deteriorates over time. So you would age just like a professional athlete ages, and you would peak just like a professional athlete does. I mean, early 20s into fading. So there is a component of hand-eye coordination, and that is really, really powerful. But the other thing is the ability to have a strategy of which in the game of football, the amount of information that you have to process in a really, really, really short amount of time is remarkably dramatic. And so you've got to be able to pull in complete game plans, schemes, personnel packages, all of these different things, and how do you manipulate the game? Then the third component is you've got to sort of almost, can you manipulate the game? And that is about, the game is a computer program. So there's ways that you can manipulate. And this is really where I accidentally became good. So specifically, I was playing a guy who was catching the ball, throwing it into flats, which is just right toward the sideline, into the flats. And I couldn't stop it because the computer programming was not allowing the defender to get near it. Man coverage, zone coverage, I couldn't get near it. So finally, I took my center and I just ran and took him off the field. I put him right off the field, thinking he's so fat and slow, he's not gonna like outrun it and maybe I'll time it so he'll hit the flats. So I threw him off there, and all of a sudden, when we hiked the ball, I see the center on offense turn and start trying to chase the fat guy, because in the computer programming's mind, he was supposed to block that guy. Well, that left a big hole. So now the next step is I created a blitz up the middle with a linebacker. So now the center leaves, and I'm sacking the quarterback before he can hand the ball off. So that's not exactly real football. So I was manipulating the programming.
That's
so there was
awesome,
three tiers of it, which is the stick skill, hand-eye, strategy of the game, and then can you manipulate the programming?
That's an incredible answer. Better than I was expecting you
you
to
need
have.
all
Just
three
like,
of them.
That's awesome.
And so it takes a lot in that way. And I guess if I were even elaborating on a fourth, is time management. And the goal is you score with no time left. You don't even want to give them time, and it gets crazy. So for me, anytime I'm watching NFL games and I see these NFL coaches screw up clock management, all I can think is like, this is like stuff that we knew how to do in Madden. You got to learn to do that. So that's crazy. And the funniest part about this, Jordan, is the tactics that we were using in Madden through the mid to late 2000s are the tactics that have essentially now become the modern NFL game. The NFL game has shifted more toward Madden than the other way around. So it's funny how these coaches have looked to these video games, and it has shaped strategy in ways that you just wouldn't believe.
It makes sense though.
It's crazy.
So what is post video game career look like for you? We haven't even hit how you got to Austin, but
post career, I had to decide, like, what am I going to do now? And I wanted to try to do something I was still passionate about. It was tough. So my wife's family, they're retired school teachers, both her parents. My parents are both retired school teachers, so I had a passion for education. My wife was an educator as well. So I ended up in ed tech, so educational technology, for a little more than a decade across some of the largest education publishers in the world. And in 2015, I actually had an opportunity with Pearson Education, who I was with at the time, to take a promotion into Austin. So it's what brought me here. And it was such a blessing to be able to do that. So not as exciting as video games, unfortunately. But
Austin's involved in that.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm curious. Just there's a little bit of a theme, and the word that keeps coming up is curiosity. So as you reflect on all of these different fields and avenues, what would you say to somebody that is, trying to figure out, man, what's your secret sauce? How are you, one of the most interesting men in the world? I keep telling you that because everything you try, you just go all out. Like, where does that come from, or how do you get started to cultivate that curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I've recognized is I always want to be learning something new on a daily basis. And it's just what I thrive on. And I think as humans, if we are stagnant going through the motions, we're not our best self. Each of us are unique. Each of us have different skill sets. So what works for me might not work for you from a perspective of career or, running a marathon or those things, but something's gonna work. And it's about how do we figure that stuff out. So, one of the things that I had done when I came to Austin is I said, I wanna try a triathlon. I want to see if I can do a triathlon. I've never done one, and quite frankly, I don't know how to swim. So I was like, this could be a little tricky. So when we talk about curious, it's also about setting goals that are attainable but challenging.
Yeah.
And so I've always pushed for that. So I decided I wanted to do a triathlon. Started when I got to Austin, training a little bit, got a bike, first bike I've had as an adult, start riding, start running. Reluctantly, I start swimming, and I still remember in a pool in our neighborhood, I go from one end of the pool to the other, and I felt like I was dying. Like I couldn't breathe, like, and so I start watching YouTube videos, figuring stuff out, and then I start learning to swim, start learning how to breathe. And by 2018, so it took a couple years, I did a Ironman 70.3 in Phoenix, of which I did get in the water and thought I was gonna die. I almost had a panic attack. So when you do the Ironman, you're in a lake, it's at 6 a.m., so it's dark out. So you're getting in a lake while it's dark with all these other people kicking you in the head, all this stuff. And I get in and I remember like, I start swimming and I'm going as fast as I can. And I finally put my head up and I swam off course a little bit. Oh my goodness. And I literally start having an anxiety attack in the water. Never had one in my life. Finally got out of the water. There was 120 people in my age group. I think I got out of the water at like 90th place, so I was really bad. But ended up doing the bike, did phenomenal, did the run, did phenomenal. Ended up in the top like 6% of my age group, top 10% of the entire race. And had I had a better swim, I would have qualified for the world. So again, being curious because I wanted to teach myself to swim. I wanted to put myself in an uncomfortable situation and try to grow and thrive out of it. So my next phase from there was, okay, I did this Ironman. I missed out on the swimming. I'm playing soccer with my daughter. We're trying to, she's playing rec, and I'm goofing off, and I try to be a goalie, and I dive, and I hurt my shoulder. Such an idiot. Like, when you're an adult, don't dive on the ground, especially here in Austin. But I hurt my shoulder, so basically my triathlon career was over, or at least for a short time. But then I decided, okay, now I'm gonna do a marathon. I've never done a marathon, so I'm gonna push and do that. And again, it was about trying to figure out, okay, what's the best method? How can I love data. Can I use a data approach? I love being curious, trying to learn how to do it. And my goal was, I want to try to qualify for Boston. How can I do that? Keep in mind, I've never run a marathon in my life. I did one half plus the half Ironman. And so I built out spreadsheets and I was trying all my nutrition. Ended up running my first marathon in 2019 and I ended up qualifying for Boston. So it was...
Just to say, it's like you have a system that you can apply to anything new that you endeavor and try to go about that seems
absolutely.
repetitive.
And for me, I'm always curious about what can I do next? What can I do next?
What would you say, with all those, you've had this kind of next opportunity, this next goal, this new endeavor that you're curious about, that you go and tackle today, all those experiences, looking back, I don't know if there's any, maybe life lessons from those that you'd want to throw in here, add to here at the end, but what would you say inspires you today or that you're living bigger for than just yourself, in this moment?
So there's so many things that I get passionate about and do inspire me. The real common answer is family. I've got 3 wonderful kids, an amazing wife. My parents are amazing. My wife's family is amazing. And I do want to grow and for them. I want to provide my kids opportunities. I want to be able to help be a good son, be a good father. And those things are really important. But when I think about what that means in action, I've done a lot of coaching through my career with sports, mainly because my kids play, so I've coached. Yeah. And what I've seen recently is, I think there's a real lack of participation in youth sports. And I'm a big believer that team sports help teach you how to be better, how to communicate better, how to be better at teamwork, how to be better at setting goals. All of these skills and these life skills you learn. And so what I'm really thinking through is how can I help grow some youth sports and grow participation there. I think something like that would be a really amazing opportunity to kind of look at next.
Yeah, well, that's an investment in the next generation, especially with the way that you see the world and think about the world. I love the idea of you passing on that mindset to people coming after us.
It's really exciting. Cool. It is.